Our last subphylum of Arthropoda are the crustaceans, and you can see that these arthropods possess two pair of antennae. They call one set the attenual and the other the antenna. And the antennae are much larger. They have multiple sensory and feeding appendages as well as modified mouth parts like a mandible and a maxilla. They also have their chilipeds and their little claws. They have walking legs, and then they have swimming legs. So totally different sets of appendages for different purposes. The head and thorax often fuse and have a cephalothorax as well. And the cuticle covering extends all the way over the cephalothorax, and it's called a carapace. Nautilus larvae live in swimming and aquatic environments, and they are very, very different from the adult form. These include crabs, lobsters, shrimp, barnacles, copepods, krill, and pillbugs, which are like those little roly-poly bugs, which no one would have guessed, right? Because almost all the crustaceans we think of are aquatic or have to be near water. So you can see that with crustaceans, they do have defensive appendages like the pinchers of the lobster. They have two sets of antennae. The cephalothorax, where the head in the thorax in adults is more fused, with the thorax still having the walking legs. The swimmerets all the way down through the tail, helping that organism be able to work through the water more efficiently. And we can compare this to like an arachnid. They also have walking legs, and they have a cephalothorax and a separate abdomen. But you can see here, it's important for a lot of organisms, whether their head is connected to their torso or not, to make sure that their organs are protected. And so in an organism with a cephalothorax that's together, it still wants to protect that brain and the nervous system. And so in the spider, it has the poison gland in front by its fangs or its chelicera, right? And then it has book lungs, but it also has those spinnerets at the bottom, and they are going to make the webs, right? And the silk gland makes the material that the webs are spun out of. This is a female because it has an ovary, and it has a receptacle for where the sperm are stored, and then it has an exit for the eggs once they're fertilized, and they spin them into their webs, right? They have digestive system, they have intestines, they have a circulatory system with a heart, and all of these things are all the same that we see in more complex mammals or animals. So now we have finished talking about the protostomes, and our last subphylum will be deuterostomes. And deuterostomes include the echinodermata and chordates like us. So these last two phyla are deuterostomes because of their development, and they develop the anus first before the mouth. And so echinoderms are radial symmetrical organisms. So they are star-shaped when we look at them, or even with the starfish and sea stars, but also even sea urchins. So they are still radially symmetrical, and they have extra appendages, more than the 5 that we see with normal sea stars. Cephalization doesn't really occur in these organisms, so they don't have like a separate head. They do have organs that are important in digestion and things of that nature. And then we also see chordata as deuterostomes as well. They're mostly vertebrates, but there are a few invertebrate as well. So the echinoderms have no brain and a very, very, very simple nervous system. They have an endoskeleton that's covered with spines, and they're little pedicelaria. The pedicelaria are the like almost like a jaw or like a little mouth part that they can use for like biting and stuff. We see these more in like sea urchins and things like that. They do have a water vascular system with these little feet. They're like little tube suction cuppy feet, and they move gas and water across them. And so what happens is that's how they move, this water vascular system. It definitely helps with gas exchange and food exchange and respiration, excretion, things like that through diffusion. But also they have these little sacs that they can fill with water and release, and that also helps with their movement. Again, they have no excretory organs, and they can intentionally detach parts of their body when they're under stress and regenerate it very quickly. Occasionally, enough of an appendage will break off that it can regenerate an entire organism from that appendage. They do reproduce sexually, and they have separate sexes and external fertilization. You can see that the starfish have that endoskeleton with their skin on top of it, and that's why it feels kind of bumpy when you touch them. They have like a ring canal, and that's just allowing the distribution of resources and nutrients through each of the appendages of the starfish. When starfish are in development, they are actually bilaterally symmetrical. And then they develop this radial symmetry with the 5 arms, or like sea urchins have a multiples of 5. Sometimes you can't tell because like an appendage may have broken off, but they have multiples of 5 as well. And that is in their adult phases. The sea stars typically have their gonadal region in their arms, like towards the end of their arms, and they do have digestive glands in every arm, all up and down. So you can see as one part breaks off, an entire new organism, it has all the parts it needs to be able to generate another organism, as long as there's enough of it to start, but it definitely has enough to regenerate the appendage it lost as well. And our last deuterostome phyla are the chordates, and there are some invertebrate chordates. Key distinguishing innovations in chordata: they have a dorsal hollow nerve cord and a notochord. In infants, they have pharyngeal slits and a postanal tail. We see these things in our early embryonic development. So some chordates experience them as adults, but others, it's only in embryonic during development that they have them. We do see cephalization again, and one of the subphylum under chordates are the lancets, cephalochordata. So a lancet has its anterior end protruding into the water, and its posterior end anchored down inside. They're marine filter feeders. You can see it, they have those little tentacles around their mouth. The pharyngeal slits is how they take in the gas exchange across their skin. They have the notochord and the dorsal hollow nerve cord and a postanal tail. And so these are very similar to early embryologically developing animals that are vertebrates as well. They are usually sessile, but they can leave their burrow and swim. So it's definitely an ancestral, more ancestral organism than some of the more complex animals that we see in this phylum as well. And the other subphylum are Urochordata. These are organisms that are tunicates, and it's like the animals on the inside, and the tunicate is a special like casing shell that keeps it safe. Adults are sessile, so they are stationary, and they have pharyngeal slits for the gas exchange. Their larvae are kind of similar to tadpoles. If you see in that picture, they have that look with the postanal tail, but they do have the siphoning, which is what allows them to move. It lets them take in and out water so they can move along in the sea. They also are the closest living relatives of vertebrates, And so the lancets are more closely related to starfish and things of that nature, but these filter feeders have two siphons and are more closely related to those of us with a vertebral column. And that is it for invertebrates.